What would you do if a luxury store laughed at your granddaughter without knowing she was the heir to one of the most powerful women on earth? She came in wearing a simple dress, no makeup, and a quiet confidence they mistook for weakness. They mocked her, filmed her, laughed at her. But when the glass doors opened again, the woman who entered didn't ask for an apology. She demanded one. And when she finished speaking, no one in that store could look her in the eye. She hadn't planned to go inside. Emma stood on the sidewalk for a moment, watching the way the boutique's glass shimmered under the afternoon light. The mannequins posed like silent judges behind the window. She wasn't dressed for this place. Her dress was cotton, pale blue, a little faded at the seams, and her sneakers were clean but clearly worn. But something about the scarf in the window called to her, not with fashion or status, but with memory. Like a whisper from a life. She wasn't sure she remembered or imagined. She took a breath and stepped inside. The air was colder than she expected, thick with expensive perfume, and the kind of curated silence that made you second-guess your own footsteps. A saleswoman glanced up, scanned her from head to toe, and immediately looked away. Emma felt it like a slap-sharp, invisible practiced. She walked slowly past rows of silk blouses and structured blazers, her fingers hovering near the edges but never daring to touch. From behind the counter, one of the assistants whispered, "She must be lost." The other giggled. Emma heard it. Of course she did, but she didn't flinch. She found the scarf she'd seen from the window cream, colored with soft floral embroidery and edges so delicately stitched it made her breath catch. She reached for it with reverence, not vanity, like she was touching something sacred. For a moment, the noise faded. She didn't see the price tag. She didn't see the eyes. She just saw her grandmother's hands long ago, folding a scarf that looked almost the same, placing it gently in a cedar box before saying, "Someday when you walk in the world, wear something that reminds you of who you are." Emma held the scarf to her chest. And behind her, a voice said too loud to be accidental, "Don't wrinkle the merchandise, sweetheart." Laughter followed. Emma didn't turn around. Not yet. She just held on tighter, like memory. Might be enough to shield her from what was about to come. The laughter wasn't sharp. It was worse than that. It was casual, practiced, the kind that didn't need to raise its voice because it already knew it had an audience. A young woman in heels clinked her coffee cup against a glass display and tilted her head at Emma like she was examining a strange animal through glass. "You shopping for a Cinderella moment, darling," she purred loud enough for everyone to hear. Another girl pulled out her phone, whispered something to her friend, and angled the camera just enough to frame Emma beside the scarf, then added a filter that made sparkles dance ironically around her head. "Wait, this is perfect," she said. Caption it, "Thrift store, Princess discovers silk." A couple of the boutique staff smirked. One of them leaned over to whisper to the manager, who didn't even try to hide her amusement. Maybe she wandered in from the food court. She said, "You know how some of them think just breathing the air in here will upgrade their lives?" Emma didn't speak. Her fingers began to tremble, barely noticeable, unless you looked closely. The scarf slipped from her grip and floated gently back onto the display table, but even that motion felt like surrender. She didn't belong here, they had made that perfectly clear. And yet, something rooted her to the spot. Something heavier than shame, stronger than pride. The girl with the phone stepped forward, mock sincere, and said, "Hey, no offense, but like this stuff's kind of out of your league, right? I mean, it's okay to just look. We all start somewhere." Another voice behind her chimed in, male this time. "Yeah, like the clearance rack." Laughter again, quieter, meaner. Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks. Her heart thudded not from fear, but from something deeper. A quiet kind of rage that couldn't find words. Only silence. She turned slowly and walked toward the fitting room. Not because she had something to try on, but because it was the only place in the store without eyes. She closed the curtain behind her, leaned against the wall, and let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding since she stepped through the door. She didn't cry, not yet. She just stood there, one hand gripping her phone in her pocket, her thumb hovering over a contact she'd never dared to call. It wasn't even saved under a name, just a single letter. E. Her grandmother, she hadn't seen her in over 10 years. The woman the world called Steel and Heels. The woman who once held her close and said, "Never let them decide your worth for you." Emma stared at the number, heart-pounding humiliation still burning in her throat. She pressed call. It rang once, then a voice. calm, crisp, unmistakable. Emma, her voice broke. They laughed. A pause, then the voice turned to ice, where Emma gave the name of the store. "Don't move," her grandmother said. "Don't say a word, I'm coming." Emma stayed inside the fitting room, long after the call ended, her arms folded tightly against her chest, trying to breathe, trying to convince herself that she hadn't just made a mistake she couldn't undo. The laughter outside had faded but not disappeared. It lingered in pockets and giggles, in whispers that still felt like blades. She could hear the girl with the phone, showing the video around now, twisting the moment into comedy. "Wait till this hits my story," she said. "It's giving charity case. Chic." Emma stared at the curtain fabric in front of her, gray and textured, as if memorizing the pattern could somehow block out the humiliation pressing into her ribs. She hadn't planned to call her grandmother. She hadn't even wanted to. That number had lived in her phone like a relic from a time that didn't belong to her anymore, a time before the fights, before her mother left, before the silence swallowed them whole. She hadn't spoken to Eleanor Langford since she was 9, not since her mother slammed the door on privilege and said they'd figure things out on their own. And mostly Emma had grown up quiet but proud, never needing anyone, never asking for anything. Until now, she didn't know what scared her more, that her grandmother had answered without hesitation, or that she was really coming. Outside the curtain, footsteps approached. Someone knocked lightly, not kindly. "Hey, dressing rooms are for customers. You're not trying anything on, so..." Emma opened the curtain slowly. The saleswoman took one look at her face and faltered just for a second. Then she smiled, the kind of smile meant to dismiss someone without confrontation. "If you're done browsing, we'll have to ask you to." But she never finished the sentence. Because the boutique's glass door swung open with a force that made the hinges shudder, and in walked a woman who didn't belong to time or trend, Eleanor Langford. Her heels clicked once against the marble floor, and then silence fell like a curtain. The staff stiffened. The influencers froze mid-sentence. The girl with the phone lowered her hand instinctively. Eleanor didn't scan the room. She didn't need to. She walked with the stillness of someone used to being in the storm. Her gray coat fell open to reveal a navy pantsuit tailored like armor. Her white hair was pulled into a low chignon, and her eyes-piercing ice blue, unreadable, locked instantly onto Emma. The world narrowed to 2 heartbeats. Emma stepped out, not fully understanding what was happening, not prepared for the shift in gravity. Eleanor walked straight to her, no hesitation, and without a word took the scarf from the display table and draped it over her granddaughter's shoulders like a crown. Then she turned to the staff and spoke, for the first time her voice calm, precise, lethal. "Who," she asked, "mocked my granddaughter?" The silence that followed. Eleanor Langford's question was not the kind that lingered awkwardly. It was the kind that thundered in its stillness, the kind that demanded answers without ever raising its voice. The saleswoman closest to the scene, young, polished, and suddenly pale, blinked twice as if trying to pretend she hadn't heard correctly. "I'm sorry," she stammered, her professional tone cracking under the weight of Eleanor's gaze. We didn't know she was yours." Eleanor's lips didn't move, not even into a frown. Her face remained perfectly composed, but her voice dropped an octave lower. "And if she wasn't mine, would your behavior have been acceptable?" Then, the woman's mouth opened, then closed again. Behind her, the other staff members seemed frozen in place, and the influencers who had been filming now held their phones at their sides like children caught misbehaving. Emma stood perfectly still, her fingers brushing the silk scarf now resting on her shoulders, her heart pounding so loudly she swore it filled the entire room. She could feel every eye on her, but none of them mattered, not the judgmental glares, not the ones who had laughed. Only Eleanor's eyes mattered now, and they weren't looking at the staff anymore. They were fixed on her. "Why didn't you call me sooner?" Eleanor asked, her tone stripped of accusation, but edged with something sharper regret. Emma swallowed. "Because I wasn't sure you'd want me to." A muscle in Eleanor's jaw moved. "I never stopped wanting you." One of the influencers, trying to recover her nerve, stepped forward slightly. "Excuse me, ma'am, but we didn't mean any harm. It was just a joke." We didn't know who she was. Eleanor turned her head slowly, her stare slicing through the girl's facade like a scalpel. You don't need to know someone's name to show them respect. And if the best you have to offer the world is ridicule masked as entertainment, then you are not only cruelly, you are boring. The girl stepped back, immediately face flushed, phone trembling in her grip. The manager finally emerged from the back room, having heard enough murmurs to understand something irreversible was unfolding. "Ms. Langford," he said, putting on his most charming damage control voice, "we had no idea this young lady was related to you. If we had known, of course we would have." "You would have," what Eleanor cut in sharply. "Pretended to care, forced a smile while whispering behind her back, sold her a scarf, she was mocked for touching it. Do you think her bloodline changes the worth of her presence?" The manager's words failed him. Emma looked around, her hands tightening slightly at her sides. "Why now?" she asked softly. "Why come today after all these years?" Eleanor's eyes shifted, and for the first time since she entered, there was something human behind the frost. Something that looked dangerously close to heartbreak. "Because today," she said, "was the first time you let me." She reached into her bag and pulled out something unexpected. Not her wallet, not a document, but a folded piece of aged paper. She handed it to Emma without explanation. Emma opened it slowly and recognized her own handwriting, childlike, shaky. A letter she had written when she was 9 and never sent. "Dear Grandma, I miss you. Do you still think about me? Sometimes I dream that you come into my school and tell everyone I'm not invisible." Emma blinked hard. "How?" "Your mother threw it away. I salvaged it." Eleanor's voice was raw. "I kept every word. Every drawing, every photo. I've watched your life from a distance for too long. I waited for a sign. You wanted me back. Today I got one." The staff watched in frozen reverence as the woman who ruled the fashion world looked at a girl in a faded dress with more pride than she had ever shown on a runway. "This is your world now," she said. "Not because of your name, but because of your choice to walk into this store without it. You could have used me years ago. You didn't. You built yourself without shortcuts. But make no mistake, Emma, you are mine, and no one, no matter how loud, gets to laugh at what I've fought to protect." The room stood still, the weight of lineage and legacy stretching like a thread between them. Eleanor turned to the manager, her voice cool again. "Put this scarf in a box. It's no longer for sale. It belongs to her." Then turning back to Emma, she said one final thing. "You're not invisible. You never were. They just lack the eyes to see you." And in that moment, Emma wasn't standing in a fashion store. She was standing in a truth no one could mock. And the girl they had tried to laugh out of the room now stood at the center of it. By the time Eleanor's instructions were carried out, the atmosphere inside the boutique had changed completely, not from decoration or lighting, but from the sheer weight of presence. The woman who had once graced the covers of every major fashion publication now stood not at a gala or a runway, but beside her granddaughter, whose only armor was dignity, and a scarf that meant more than any price tag could name. The scarf was wrapped carefully, boxed and tied with a ribbon, and placed into Emma's hands like an offering. But Eleanor didn't stop there. She turned to the manager, calm but unreadable. "You will close the store," she said. "Now?" The manager blinked, unsure if she meant temporarily or permanently. "I'm sorry, you mean?" I said, "Close it to the public." From this moment forward, she pulled out a slim black checkbook, yes, a physical one, elegant and hand-stitched, because Eleanor Langford didn't need apps or digital signatures to command respect. She wrote a number so swiftly and precisely that the assistant manager who caught a glimpse of it audibly gasped. "I am purchasing this location," Eleanor said. "Everything in it. The fixtures, the inventory, the lease, the name, I want it, effective immediately." Silence. One of the employees dropped a hanger. A nearby customer who had filmed the earlier confrontation now had her phone trembling in her hands, realizing she might be recording something that would end up on every news channel before midnight. But Eleanor wasn't done. She turned to the employees one by one. "You," she said to the saleswoman who had laughed first. "Out." "Please, Ms. Langford, I didn't know." "No, and that's the problem. You didn't know how to treat a human being with grace unless she had a pedigree." She turned to the second girl. "You followed, you giggled, you participated. Out." The girl burst into tears, pleading under her breath, but Eleanor simply raised a hand and said, "Spare your apologies. Offer them to someone who believes you." She turned to the manager. "You'll stay for now? Because someone must clean this rot from the inside." The crowd was stunned, but it was when she turned to the influencers, still trying to play it cool, still pretending not to be shaking, that everything froze again. "You wanted to go viral," Eleanor said. "Congratulations! You'll be famous for reminding the world what cruelty looks like when it hides behind a phone screen." Then slowly she stepped back beside Emma and looked at her, not like she was a lost girl to protect, but like a mirror that had just reminded her of everything she once stood for. "Walk with me," she said Emma did, past the trembling staff, past the rows of merchandise that now meant nothing, past the glass doors that slid open for her, as if the world itself had changed its locks. Cameras waited outside, journalists' questions. But Eleanor didn't give them a soundbite. She gave them an image Emma in her cotton dress holding a box tied with ribbon, her chin high standing beside the woman whose name built empires. And as they stepped into the waiting car, Eleanor whispered something only Emma could hear. "You didn't need me to walk in power. You just needed to be reminded of who you've always been." Emma didn't reply. She didn't need to, because the street outside had already begun to see her differently. Not because of the scarf, or the money, or the name, but because she had walked into the fire they set for her, and never bowed her head. The headlines exploded before they even made it home. Billionaire Eleanor Langford buys boutique. After staff, mock granddaughter, flashed across every major news outlet. But it wasn't the wealth that captured the world's attention. It was the video. The clip of Emma standing silently while her grandmother defended her without a single raised voice became a symbol almost overnight. News anchors debated it, stylists commented on it, ethics professors dissected it, and thousands of girls reposted it with one simple caption. "This is what protection looks like." But Eleanor didn't just protect. She acted behind closed doors. She summoned the boutique's board members, lawyers, and branding directors into a single emergency meeting. She spoke with a calmness that was terrifying. "You allowed this to happen in my house," she said, "and from this moment forward, we clean it." One by one, licenses were revoked, partnerships were restructured, staff across multiple locations were reassessed, trained, or released. But the second twist came not from Eleanor's power, it came from what Emma did next. She had stayed mostly quiet through the media storm, declining interviews, ignoring DMs, even as tabloids scrambled for her backstory. But when a journalist finally caught her walking alone through a park, no bodyguards, no press team, and asked, "What would you say to the girls who watched you and saw themselves?" Emma didn't pause. She said, "Tell them they never needed a billionaire to be worth respect, just their own voice and a world willing to listen." That answer became its own headline. Suddenly the narrative wasn't just about a wealthy grandmother stepping in. It was about a young woman who never used that wealth as a weapon. The third twist unfolded days later, when the boutique tried to reopen under a new name, rebranded with new staff and a different image. But no one came, not because the clothes weren't beautiful, but because the silence was louder than any launch party. The boutique became a ghost space. Whispers of its history etched into the walls, because the world had already seen what it had done. The influencers. Most of them lost sponsorships. The videos they had once proudly posted were now buried under apologies and disclaimers. But no apology could rewrite what had already been seen. How easy it was to mock someone when you thought they had nothing, and how quickly that mockery turned to fear the moment they had a name. Eleanor watched it all unfold from her office, sipping tea in silence, but it was Emma who felt the shift most deeply. Not in public, but inside herself. She no longer felt the sting when strangers stared. She no longer flinched when a store clerk looked her up and down, because she had lived through the moment when her worth was questioned in front of the world, and survived. And in doing so, she had shown the world something money couldn't buy: grace, restraint. And the quiet kind of power that doesn't need to be declared. It simply arrives. The world expected her to rise in diamonds to accept the crown her last name could grant her, to sweep into fashion, weeks with cameras at her heels and signatures worth millions. But Emma didn't want that. She sat across from Eleanor in a private suite, tea untouched, a blank contract between them, creative director. Eleanor said gently, tapping the title at the top of the page, "Your name, your collection. A space for you to shape this industry on your terms." Emma stared at it, the weight of everything she'd once dreamed of, now real and ready. But instead of excitement, there was something heavier in her chest: clarity. "It's beautiful," she said quietly, "but it's not what I want." Eleanor didn't flinch. She just listened. Emma continued, "I don't want to be the face of something that still leaves most people behind. I don't want to be a symbol for people who'll never be allowed into the rooms we build." Eleanor leaned back, studying her granddaughter, not with disappointment, but with something closer to awe. "Then what do you want?" Emma folded her hands. "I want to start something quieter. A mentorship program for girls who walk into boutiques and get laughed at, for students who sketch designs in the back of math class because they think the industry doesn't see them. I want to teach them how to walk in without needing permission." Eleanor smiled, genuinely softly, spoken like a true Langford, but this time it didn't feel like an inheritance. It felt like a partnership. Within weeks, the program launched under a single name: Visible No Pomp, No Velvet Ropes. Just sewing machines, fabric bins, workshops in converted stores, and mirrors that didn't lie. Girls came from neighborhoods. No fashion brand had ever stepped into each of them, carrying more talent than they had ever been told they had. Emma didn't lead from a pedestal. She sat beside them, sleeves rolled, listening more than she spoke. One afternoon, a girl with trembling hands held up her sketchbook and said, "I don't know if this is good enough." Emma took the page, smiled, and said, "It's not about being good enough. It's about being seen." The girl cried, and so did Emma. Because that was the twist no one saw coming. Not that Emma turned down power, but that she gave it away. And in doing so, became more powerful than anyone expected. The change didn't come with a bang. No press release or flashing lights. Just the quiet swell of something genuine spreading through places that had long been closed off. Emma's program, Visible, began as a whisper, but within months, it became a movement. Girls who once hid their ideas now post their first designs online, their captions filled with courage instead of fear. Seamstresses from forgotten corners of the city brought their stories and patterns to life, on real fabric, no longer waiting for approval. And slowly the industry began to listen. Fashion houses that once scoffed at inclusion started sending interns to learn from Visible, not to teach, but to observe. Editors who used to scoff at untrained talent now ran features titled, "The Street is the New Runway." Emma declined most interviews yet. Her name trended more than ever, not because she was loud, but because what she built was undeniable. Every girl who stepped into a Visible workshop didn't just walk out with skills. They walked out with mirrors that reflected them honestly for the first time. In Milan, a designer credited her breakthrough collection to a 13-year-old mentee from Emma's program. In New York, a former influencer aunt known for mocking, Emma issued a real apology, then donated her entire closet to the cause. And in Paris, a major label changed its casting policy. After a viral post showed one of Emma's students scarred and radiant, walking a makeshift runway in an old boutique-turned-training center. But the most powerful ripple wasn't in headlines. It was in one simple moment. A young girl named Sophia, 12, too quiet to speak in class, walked into a boutique in a borrowed dress and asked, without flinching, "Do you carry something in my size?" The staff nodded. No laughter, no judgment, just respect. And when asked how she found the courage, she said, "I saw a girl once who stood tall in a scarf. They tried to laugh her out of. I decided to walk like her." Emma watched the clip from her tiny office, a space filled with fabric swatches, letters from girls, and a photo of her and Eleanor at the back of that boutique months ago. She didn't cry, she smiled, because the world hadn't just changed how it saw her. It had started changing how it saw them all. Not for what they wore, but for who they were. And that was the legacy she never planned, but always carried, long after the headlines quieted and the novelty wore off. Her story remained. Not as a viral moment, but as a marker in time, the point where something subtle and seismic shifted. No one called her the scarf girl anymore, and yet that moment lived in the hearts of people who had never even walked into a boutique. It lived in the posture of women who now entered rooms without apology. It lived in the silence that followed when someone tried to laugh at someone else and found no audience willing to laugh back. Emma had returned to the boutique only once, months after it had been converted into the first full-time Visible studio. The glossy mannequins were gone, replaced with fabric draped across dress forms covered in pins and dreams. A dozen girls stitched patterns into reality, while soft music played from a speaker by the window. She walked through the space slowly, not as a founder, not as an heiress, but as a girl who had once stood in a corner and wondered if her presence would ever matter. A small voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Do I really belong here?" a new girl asked, holding a sketchbook to her chest like armor. Emma knelt to meet her eyes. "You always did," she said. "They just didn't know how to see you yet." Meanwhile, in a dimly lit studio across town, a cultural historian spoke to a camera crew, filming a documentary called The Rise of Quiet Power. Her voice was calm, deliberate. Emma Langford redefined what it means to be seen. She didn't take over an empire. She didn't burn down the old world. She stood in the center of it and dared it to look her in the eye, and it blinked on the screen. A montage played, Emma adjusting a student's hem, opening a letter from a girl who escaped a bullying spiral, standing beside her grandmother at a press-free fundraiser with no red carpet, no sponsors, just stories. The historian continued, "What she taught us is simple dignity. Doesn't scream, it doesn't beg, it waits." And when you finally recognize it, it's already changed you. The final frame showed Emma stepping into sunlight, her scarf fluttering in the breeze. No crowd, no entourage, just a quiet presence that filled the screen like a promise. And beneath that image, her words faded in hand, written in soft script, "Let them laugh, and then let them kneel." The screen went black, no credits, no outro music, just silence. The kind of silence that doesn't ask for applause, but makes you sit with yourself. The kind that lingers in your chest long after the story ends. They mocked her for being invisible, but she didn't raise her voice. She didn't throw a scene, she simply stood tall and let the world expose itself. And when her grandmother arrived, not with fury, but with quiet, unstoppable truth, every head bowed, because the moment wasn't about money, it was about respect, about power that doesn't scream, but silences rooms. And now, every girl who's ever been laughed at for not looking the part walks in like she owns the place. Because maybe, just maybe she does.